Okay, so welcome back everybody. This is going to be quite a long video. This is quite complex, so I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm hoping to get it done in just one video, but it might run over into two. We'll see how we get on, and we'll see how it turns out. And what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at packaging, well, visualization really. And it's really important to visualize designs into something that people can see, like a product or a t-shirt or a shop front or whatever it might be. But it's really important to be able to see that. And we're going to be using both Photoshop and Illustrator today, starting in Illustrator and then bringing through into Photoshop. So this is what we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with a can, not this one, but I'm going to show you how to do it, and a carton using this design. So if we go back to the beginning and we go into Illustrator, what we need to do is obviously we need to start with an image that's got some packaging on it, something that's white. You can get things from iStock or Shutterstock. This is from iStock photo, and it's just a series of cartons in different orientations, and we're going to use one of these. I've picked this one because it's got a front view here, and now I'll be able to use this front view as a template for the net plan that I'm going to create. So first thing what I need to do is I've brought this picture in, which is basically file, place, and then place your picture in there. I've already placed it in, so I don't need to do that again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw over the top of this shape. And what I'm going to do is I want to draw a shape that's roughly the size of the carton front. It doesn't matter really what colour I do it. Now I'm just going to lock that layer because the layer that the carton's on is causing a bit of an issue, and I'm going to pop that on a layer at the top. I just pop that on that layer there. So just lock that layer and I can go back there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a carton shape at the front like so, and the carton is square, so it's like the same distance there and the same distance there. So I can copy and paste that, Control C, Control F, which is paste in front, and create two. So that gives me two sides. And in these visualizations that we've only got two visible sides. So we've got this side, this side, and that side. On this one we can only see the front, but I'm going to use one of these for the actual visualization. And we need to then put the top on, so I'm going to use the same square again, Command C, Command F, drag it up, and this time we have to eyeball it a little bit. It's more to do with working out what we think this sort of dimension would be. We're going to squash it anyway and distort it in Photoshop, so as long as it's got enough height to do that, then that's all that matters. Then we're going to copy it again, Command C, Command F, and then this is the little flap here that we're going to create. So that's approximately about that sort of size. So we're creating like a shape like this. We've got to do this bit here as well, and that's a little bit complicated, and you'll see how we do that later on, but predominantly we're working on these sides here. Okay, these main sides here. Once we've got that, I'm just going to make that all the same stroke width, so it's all the same size. We're not going to actually use this much other than for positioning. It's mainly going to be a positioning thing. We're not going to actually see any of these green lines. Okay. So once we've done that, we can actually copy that and bring it into Photoshop. So let's bring it into the carton mock-up. Okay. So this is what it looks like at the end, and this is what it looks like at the beginning. So I'll leave that turned off, and you'll see what I produce over the top of that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paste in that net plan that I've just created from Illustrator. And there we have the net pasted into Photoshop. As you can see, because we've used the actual size of the image in Illustrator, when we've copied it across, it's the same size in Photoshop. If you change the size of the image in Illustrator, then you'll have to maybe scale it up in Photoshop, but that's not a massive issue. We'll just hide that bar. So we've now got our net plan on our carton. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a smart object. We need to make it a smart object to do what we're going to do. So convert to smart object. The reason why we convert it to a smart object is because when we put the actual graphics into it, we do it in another window. It's in a separate window later on. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to position this roughly on this part here. So I'm going to use this as a starting point. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Perspective Warp, and then I'm going to start creating, some mesh that fits over the top of the area that I've created, which is the rectangle net. So each area that I'm going to distort has to have its own mesh. So that means the top part, which is the flap, the bit below that, and the two sides. Once we've done that, we can click OK, and we've created a mesh. Now if I double click on this, it'll bring it back up. So what I can start to do now is I can start to click on this and start moving those positions. So I can now move these positions. Now this can be a little bit, let's say, funky. It doesn't always work straight away where you position them. So you move one and it moves another one somewhere else, but it's a little bit fiddly. But once you get the hang of it, and you don't have to be too accurate because we're going to tweak it later on. So let's just move these into position. As you can see, they're all moving about. But once we get everything into place, because it's in a perspective, it will sort of like balance itself out. It'll start to understand where we are. It's because it's trying to force itself into a perspective when the points aren't actually in perspective. So, and we want to be a little bit outside of the actual carton, just a little bit outside, because then we can mask it out later on. Anything that's, what we don't want is like a white outline around here. So we've created our map, and we can click OK. So we've now got our smart object, which is now wrapped using the warp around the box, and you can see it hangs over the edges a little bit. I'm just going to rename that and call it carton wrap. So now what we need to do is we need to bring into Photoshop our actual graphics that we're going to put on this. Before we do that, we're going to double click on this, and it's going to open up that layer. So that layer 4, which was the carton, has now become another Photoshop file. And this is basically the outline that we've created, but we've wrapped it in the other Photoshop file. So it's wrapped in this one, but we're actually going to position the graphics in this one. So back in Illustrator, and for those of you that know what Blue Peter is, here's one I made earlier, and these are the designs that I'm going to use. So you can see I've got the net plan over the top, and I've got the graphics underneath. I've set everything up in layers so I can turn my outlines off for my net plan. I've got my graphics on a separate layer, and I've got my patterns on a third layer. So I don't need my outlines because I don't need that, but I do need this. So I'm going to select all these bits and copy them and paste them. And again, it should fit relatively well because it's the same size. There might be a little bit of scaling issue, so we can just scale it up like that. So that's now positioned my pattern or my graphics into the areas that I want it to go onto the carton. So if we save this now, so it doesn't work unless you save it, so you have to press save, so you can see it's saving up the top there. It's just saving itself. And then when we go to the right one, not that one, this one. So as you can see, it's now wrapped it round. So that's what it looked like before. That's what it looks like now. Now we've got this funny little leaf shape here. And the reason for that is because this part of the plan, or this part of the pattern, has not got anything warped. So the only things that we warped was this section, this section, this section, this section. This section, it doesn't know what to do with it. So let's go back to the carton. So you can see there we've got a bit hanging off the side. So let's get rid of that now. And all we do is make a selection over the area that's not got any mesh, which is this bit here. Turn that back on and delete that. Take that off of the actual graphic. Save it again and return back to the mock-up. So now you can see there's that bit's no longer there, it's cut out and there's a little bit of a gap. Okay, so looking good. So we now need to fill in this little gap here. Okay, so what we do, we're back in Illustrator. Turn this back on. So we need a shape that's just this area here. So we need this, basically this shape here as a separate shape. So we're going to copy that. So I'm just copying the outlines back into Photoshop and we're going to paste that into Photoshop. So this is another, we're going to do another warp with this. So I'm going to rename it and we're going to call it flap. And then we're going to convert it to a smart object like so. So same again, I'm just going to position it up here. Now this can be really fiddly, this one, so you'll see it will take a bit of doing, so I might have to speed this up when I do it. So first of all I need to add my mesh. So add my mesh, then click on the warp tool and then I can position it. So I'm just going to position these points in here. I can see it just doesn't want to do it straight away because the points are all in higgledy-piggledy. So let's just get them again roughly in the right position, right place. Doesn't matter about this bit here because we're going to mask that out. That's roughly down the crease in there. That looks okay. Happy with that. Can zoom in a little bit if you want to and have a look at it. You can see probably, and if you want to change it, just double click and then just reposition as you need to. You can even do that once the pattern's on, so you can see this one. Here's like a bit of a gap, so let's just go back to that one, just change some of those points. Bring that up there. Bring that up there. That's good. Select. Okay, so we've now got a second piece that we now need to apply the texture to. So again, we're going to double click this to open it, not that bit. Double click this to open it up. Go into Illustrator. Now what I'm going to do is I only need the pattern. So I'm going to go to the pattern layer, lock all this, turn that off. Oh no, I'll leave that on. And I'm going to go to the pattern layer and I'm going to scale this down. Now if I scale this down like this, can you see what happens? It scales everything. It scales the actual pattern. But if I go to Object and I go to Transform and Scale, I turn off Transform Patterns. Now when I scale it, it's just going to scale the window. So the pattern stays the same size, which is what I want. And it's just scaling the window. I want the green bit the same size. There we go. So I can now just select that bit, select it all, copy, and paste. And there we go. There it goes. It's fitted it fairly well. So double click, file save, and this time we shouldn't have too many things as a problem. It should look fairly good. So there we go. You can see it's folded itself in there. We do have this little bit here that's over the top. We'll get rid of that in a minute. Cup of tea time. Okay. So first of all, we want this layer to be below this layer. So I'm going to drag the flap layer below the carton layer, and so that no longer can we see this in here. It's like behind it. We are going to have to mask it out at some point though, but we'll do that in a minute. Okay, so it's looking okay. It's looking a little bit flat. It doesn't look like it's got any detail on it because we're not seeing any of this detail come through. If we look at the box, originally it's got some shadows, it's got some highlights, and what we're seeing is a very flat sort of like image laid over the top that doesn't really fit. So what we're going to do now is now start to blend it together. So first thing we do, select the layer that we want to blend, go to the blending modes, and we choose multiply. So now you can see what's happened is you can see this little bit. This is from this bit coming through. I'm going to sort that out in a minute. And again, do the same with that one. Multiply. And what that's doing is it's multiplying this image with the image below. It's taking the values of the greys and the whites in here, and it's allowing them to come through this. We're going to improve it even more in a bit, but that's what's basically happening. So let's get rid of some of these things that we don't need. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use a mask to mask it round here. So I'm going to select this bottom layer, go to my select tool, click on my object. There we go. So it's now selected it. I'm now going to select the layer that I want to mask it with. So you can see where this is the shape of the carton, because we've selected it from this, but you can see this is hanging over. But what we can do is we can use the mask tool or the mask function and click it, and what it'll do is it will create a black and white matte that allows us to see through the white and not the black. So there we go. So it's created that shape. So the black is now in a matte we can't see, but we can see through onto the white. And as you can see, it's trimmed it all out. So that's the reason why we had it hanging over the edges, because we've now clipped it to the edge of the carton. Okay. We now need to do a similar thing for the flap. We need to mask the flap out, but this isn't a case of using a selection. We're going to have to manually tell the computer which bits we want. So I'm going to select the parts inside the flap that I want using the lasso tool, and then I'm going to do the same thing again by clicking on the mask, and it's masked out everything apart from that little triangle there. There's a little bit of something there. We could probably faffle about with that little bit, but for the time being it's okay. You'll probably not notice when you see it at the full size. And also when we start to add some of the other detail to it, you'll probably disappear. So that's looking good. We're nearly there actually. We're not doing too bad for time. So the last thing we need to do is need to blend the layers together. So I'm going to go onto this layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on it, and it brings up the layer style blending options. Now to get that also, you can just right click and choose blending options, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this underlying layer, which is the layer below it, and we're going to blend it. So I'm going to hold Alt down, and I'm going to click on this second part of this handle and drag it back. Now can you see that we've got some light coming through here? It's actually changing as I drag this back. So I don't want to drag it too far back, otherwise I'll lose everything, but I want to blend it a little bit. So I'm just going to bring it back a little bit like that. Click OK. And I'm going to do the same with this. So again, double click, bring up the blending mode, blending options, Alt click, click on the left hand side and drag it back. Now we should see again it fading in there. Okay, looking good. So I'd like a little bit more shadow on this side, just to give it a bit more definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to use my lasso tool again to create a shape. I'm going to fill that with black. And I'm going to reduce its opacity down. So what that's going to do, as you can see, is just giving a little bit more definition to that side of the box. Without it, with. Without it, with. And that means that there's a bit more definition to the actual visualization of it. So the last thing is the cap. So we just need to sort the cap out. So we're going to zoom into the top part here first of all. And we're going to go into here and we're going to create a little mask inside this mask. So we select the mask. You can see the difference to the white round that edge. There's now white around that. So that's now selected. And we're going to come in here and we're going to draw around the cap. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool. There's other ways of doing this, but I'm going to use the pen tool for this one so you can see a different way of actually creating something. So I'm just going to draw around it using the pen. This doesn't actually select it. What this does is it creates a path that we can then select later on. So I'm just going to go around it. Again, you can be really careful with this, and probably I'm going to go a little bit faster because I'm cautious of time. There we go. Now under paths, so you've got layers, channels, paths. If you click on paths, you'll see that path, that work path, is that little shape that I've created. And I can use the drop down menu to say make selection. Feather radius, I want 0, and it's now selected that area. So I can now fill that with black because I want it to disappear, like so. And the reason why it's doing that is because it's at 79%. So if I just make that to 100%, it'll do it all in one go. There we go. Now I want to keep that selection because that selection is really useful. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to fill that with a colour. So let's pick a colour from here. And I'm going to fill that with the colour. So let's get the paint bucket and fill that there. Okay. Again, we need to blend it, so multiply. And we also need to give it some detail of what's below it. So again, double click the layer to get the blending options. Alt click on the little handle, bring it back, so it's bringing it back a little bit more so we can see some of the highlights coming through. And then the last thing we need probably to do is to probably add a little bit of something to bring that through. So if we add a curves option, and I just bring that down a little bit and lift the highlights up a little bit. So it's making everything at the moment brighter, but I'm just focusing on the cap. And then all I need to do is to hold Alt down, go in between the two layers, and then it'll isolate this adjustment to only the cap below. It'll only change from that onto that area. It won't do all these. And there we have it. So we've now got a fully visualized carton from a flat drawing and created what would look like a product for a client to approve. Just the last little thing, I'm just going to group all this together into a folder. So if I select all the layers that I've been working on, so that's all these, and then click on the folder, it'll turn it into a group, and then you'll see before and after. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that, and in the second part of this video I'm going to show you how to do the can. So the can looks like this. It's a slightly different process, but it's a little bit quicker than doing the carton. So if you watch that, you'll have two different techniques and be able to mock up a can and something that's like a box shape. So I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.